I guess, I think an important thing just to set the stage, Alexis, is how many grams of carb per hour do you think are optimal for doing a podcast?
Oh, for a podcast per hour? Oh, geez. I don't know, but definitely a lot of grams of coffee.
A lot of grams of coffee? How many coffees do you drink a day?
Probably not a lot, actually. I just sip on it all day.
You sip on it all day? Do you have a stop time?
Sometimes 3, ideally.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I'm asking because for the company that I'm starting, it's related to helping people build essential health habits that have a really high ROI. And in the sleep category right now, I'm running a test related to time shifting people's caffeine consumption. So I'm always really curious, like, what are people drinking and when do they stop? Anyway, so obviously I've done a ton of research about you. I've tried to listen to all the podcasts that you've been on. And just this morning, I was watching your White Rim FKT video. Nice. And, I've also had Pete Stetina on here, and I'm sure you watched Pete's video where he did that attempt and missed it by a margin that I believe could have been accounted for just by GPS drift.
Oh, it's so rough.
Yeah. But, one aspect of yours that I'm really curious about is what was that like for your relationship with your fiance at the time?
The White Rim experience, or what do you like?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like that must be a really intense thing for a relationship, or maybe it's not, but just from the outside, that was the thing that I was curious about.
Question. Yeah, I have to remember now because it's been since 2020, but it was kind of an interesting time, I think, because at that point I had just gotten on the Santa Cruz team. And before that, Jeff, my fiance, was like my whole support system. And he came to races and supported me and all that kind of thing. And it was kind of a transitional period with the White Rim, with him supporting me and then now the team supporting me. And so I think not just the whole White Rim situation, but just the time period that it was in was just, I guess, interesting in that aspect.
Yeah. What has the shift been like between having your partner support you and then now having a team that takes care of most of that stuff, I would think, or maybe it doesn't. What is that like?
Yeah, it changed a lot because, I guess that first year we were so used to just working the two of us. And then it was just like a learning curve on how to make it work with the team also. And it kind of just gradually became the team is now like the support for the racing. And then home life just became more of a separate thing.
Yeah.
So it kind of separated the two things.
Yeah. Did that go smoothly?
Not really. I think the first year was just difficult to figure out our place, like his place and then my place, and then like how to make that whole machine function smoothly. And eventually it all sorted itself out, but it just took, it took about a year, I think, to get used to the new way of doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this a little bit before we got rolling, but you're at home right now, and yes. Gravel Worlds are about to happen in Italy, and you were selected for the team. So why are you at home right now?
Looking at my race calendar, I had to make a tough decision. So if I had done Worlds, it would have been 7 races in a row of like super important priority races. I really wanted to race Marathon Nationals. That one was important to me. I wanted to go for the jersey. The 2 Lifetime Series events were important since where I'm sitting in second place. And I already had my 2 drop races, I hope. So I needed to do well in those. And the first one was Gravel Nationals. There was a lot of money on the line. And weirdly enough, Gravel Worlds kind of just wasn't as big of a priority. I'm having a little bit of FOMO now making that decision because I didn't know how well Gravel Nationals was going to go. It would have been cool to get first place and go get it paid for. But I at the time, gravel just wasn't really as much of a priority. But now I kind of wish, seeing everyone out there, I kind of do wish I was out there with the team.
Yeah, I was just looking at the start list for both the men's and women's races this morning, and the fields are incredibly stacked. And there are also, one of the things that was most interesting to me is that the Italian and Dutch teams have to have close to 20 riders each. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if the I don't know what the qualification standards are to get into gravel worlds. Clearly, it must be different than what it is for road or mountain bike, because the size of these teams is just kind of nuts. I've never seen teams this big at a world championship event. I have no idea if you have any insight into what's going on there, but it seems like you could bring infinity riders if they met the selection criteria.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea, and I don't know how it works on the road scene, so I wouldn't be able to compare, but that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Do you have any thoughts one way or the other about what's happening with gravel world championships and the UCI's involvement in the sport this year?
Not really. I haven't really, because I've been focused so much on domestic races and mountain biking. I don't.
Okay. And this is, Alexis, this is something I often do because my mom is one of my core listeners of my podcast. Shout out to Bonnie. And one of the things she always asks me is, she says, sometimes she gives me the feedback of, you get into areas where you're not giving any context, and a lot of your listeners probably don't know what you're talking about. But just as it relates to the domestic national scene, I mean, you are an incredibly high caliber professional mountain biker, and you also are racing the Lifetime Grand Prix and all these gravel events and mixed disciplines. Mm-hmm. What is the state of mountain bike racing in the United States right now? And if you had the ability just to completely sustain yourself racing mountain biking, would you be doing this other stuff?
It is interesting. Kind of, it's what disciplines become popular and fall in and out of popularity, I guess. And this whole gravel scene is so big right now, and that's kind of where everyone's attention is at. And you kind of have to follow what's, you know, where the interest is. And where my heart lies is definitely still with mountain biking. I really like that 3 to 4 hour range of marathon events in mountain biking. But gravel biking is definitely growing on me a little bit, I would say. It's been a learning curve in the style of racing. I'm used to going hard, and it's more of an individual thing where you're just racing as hard as you can on your own. And gravel, I've really had to control my effort and learn how to work with people and learn tactics. And it's been a really interesting learning experience, and I do appreciate that part of it. So it has opened up my world a little bit in skill sets and that kind of thing. I'm still getting the hang of that. As far as where mountain biking is, there's not a lot of opportunities, it seems like, in the whole mountain biking scene in the United States right now. It seems like the US stuff in the United States is mostly mostly a junior attended event. And I'd like to see that change in the future. It'll be interesting to see if it kind of comes back.
Did you do NICA growing up? Was that available to you?
No, NICA wasn't really a thing. I think that started the year after I left, and I was big into running at the time, so I don't think I would have gotten into it. Okay. I actually ran mostly through college until injuries kind of prevented me from racing, and that's how I got into cycling through collegiate college racing.
What injuries did you have?
A bunch of overuse injuries, stress fractures, tendonitis, kind of had a little bit of everything. Chondromalacia was a big one. That's where your knee, the cartilage in your knee hardens and like scrapes against the kneecap, and it's really painful. And it takes like 6 to 8 months to completely heal. So I would be out of this, season for a long time. And riding bikes is much less impact, and I found I could actually race longer without having to sit out. And so that's I started drifting towards biking.
Were you bummed out when your running career ended?
It was so gradual that honestly, I don't even know if I noticed it happened.
Really?
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely was bummed out when I was injured and I had to sit out during the season, but I would go in and out of racing with the with the cycling team. And then, I finished out my 4 years of running eligibility with the team, and then started mountain biking and found success. And I just switched into it so quickly that it just, I didn't really miss running because of just enjoying mountain biking, I guess.
What was your first ride with the team like? Do you remember that?
Kind of. It's interesting. When I was on the team at CMU, there weren't a lot of women participating yet. Now it's like a huge, probably 50-50 women to men ratio on the CMU team, and it's a big thing. But I was there at the beginning, and so it was just me with a bunch of guys. And I don't really remember a lot of our training rides, but I do remember going to nationals for mountain biking that first year I went, and just thinking, I do not belong here. What am I doing? And it was snowy and muddy, and I remember pre-riding with the guys, and I couldn't get up some of the things that they were getting up, and I just remember having almost a breakdown, like, I can't do this. And interestingly enough, the next day, because of the mud, we ended up having to run a lot of the sections, and was like able to pass people on the climbs, and ended up winning the marathon national event. And it's just thinking, well, maybe this is something I can do. It gave me confidence to think about it and pursue it.
That seems like something that might give someone confidence that when you win the race, right?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting, unique situation, I think.
Was there a point when you knew you wanted to make this your profession, or did it just kind of naturally happen over time?
When I graduated college, I wanted to either pursue marathon running, triathlons, or mountain biking. And I think I just naturally fell into mountain biking because it made the most sense in my lifestyle, and with results and opportunities, it just doors opened that direction. I knew I wanted to do some sort of professional sport. That's just what I wanted to do since 4th grade. It's just, I never would have thought mountain biking would have been my sport, but that's just where I ended up.
And what did it look like initially to be a professional cyclist? Like, did you have other jobs? Were you patching things together, or were you able to totally make a living and support yourself going out and racing bikes?
Yeah, that was such a huge learning experience. I think people don't realize how hard it is to become a professional athlete, especially in the sport of mountain biking, where, it's not as popular to watch as, like basketball or team sports. It's hard to find sponsors and opportunities, and I think I thought that there would be more going into it as a professional, but I ended up working full-time as a substitute teacher, and that was just super draining, dealing with kids, who aren't on their best behavior with a substitute, and then trying to train when I would get home. And the first couple of years were a bit of a struggle. I was getting last place at races and kind of going backwards in abilities, and sorry. Yeah, it took me a while to figure out that whole balance of work life and racing. Eventually I started going part-time with substitute teaching, and I was able to get a lot further with my training, and I got a coach. My coach actually was Jeff, my fiance, for my first couple years, and that definitely was hard on our relationship, I think, just because playing coach and in a relationship just butted heads. And so learning that as well, figuring out relationship and job and racing, all of that thing, and getting out into the real world after college, it was definitely a hard transition. When
you were substitute teaching, was there a particular topic or age range? Like, I don't know much about substitute teaching, so how did that work?
I have my teaching license in PE.
Okay.
But as a substitute teacher, you just teach everything and anything. And so I taught kindergarten, actually preschool through high school.
Whoa.
And
that's range. That's some serious range.
All subjects. And you walk into a classroom, sometimes you'll have really well thought out plans, and sometimes you won't have anything at all. And so it was that was kind of a character building experience on its own, honestly. And I actually became this what they would call emergency substitute teacher, where they would call me morning of and tell me where to go, where they would need a substitute like right away. And so, you know, I wouldn't know what I'm getting into that day. And it was interesting. Every day was different.
What did you learn about people from doing that?
Oh, I learned, I think, more about myself through this experience. I think I learned, just that whole like leadership role and how to handle a lot of people. Because, you know, you've got 25, 30 kids. You've got to be paying attention to every single kid at once. And that's hard for me. I'm not necessarily in particular good at that sort of thing. I learned that it's hard for me to focus on a lot of people and be in charge of people in that way. So, I don't think it's a strength of mine, and that's what I learned.
Yeah. So while you were doing that, you know, to make ends meet, and you're also pursuing becoming a professional athlete, did you have a high degree of confidence in your ability to go to the next level as you were going through that process?
At first I did. And then, like I said, when I graduated and tried to figure out the balance of everything, I lost a lot of confidence. At some point during this whole thing, I ended up getting rheumatoid arthritis, and that whole thing was it like hurt a lot of my confidence as well. It took me a while to figure out what was going on there. And I guess I'm kind of jumping some years here, because this was when I finally got onto my first team with Stan's No Tubes.
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of the pink team, and I just got onto Cannondale bikes, and everything started getting painful. My joints were hurting, and I was blaming the equipment, and I couldn't figure out what was going on for the longest time. And a friend of ours on the high school team, he was one of the coaches, and he was a doctor, and said, maybe you have rheumatoid arthritis. And I was like, no. And as the years went by, I was like, well, something's definitely not right. Things were, it was difficult I feel like I've trailed off on a completely different career.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm curious with rheumatoid arthritis, like once you found out that was what was going on, mm-hmm. Is that something that you have to continually manage? Like, is that something you're still managing today?
Yeah. So rheumatoid arthritis is a degenerative, thing. So it's something that gets worse every year, but if you can kind of keep it under control, it's better. And I've gotten on medications, biologics that help keep it under control. And I actually honestly don't even notice I have it anymore now that I'm on this drug. And it's completely made my life normal. So, which has been awesome. But it took a while to get to that point, to trust taking medication and to kind of get past the point of denial of even having it. It was interesting. It got to the point where I couldn't turn the key in my ignition, and walking was painful. I couldn't do push-ups. I couldn't put any weight on my wrists, or just walking or sitting in a chair was painful. The most painful thing was putting socks on in the morning. I remember getting dressed or trying to find clothes was hard. I was like, okay, I think this is past the point of training. I don't think this is just me training hard anymore. Something else is going on. And I think the breaking point was I was at a yoga class and I just wanted to move. I wanted to be able to move and I couldn't. And I just like broke down and I was like, I need to do something about this.
How long did it take from the onset of those symptoms to you figuring out, okay, this is what's going on, and then getting to a point where you were managing it with medication?
I would say, let's see, that was probably 3 years, I want to say.
Wow.
Or two maybe years.
That must have been hard.
Well, what's interesting and frustrating about it is you go into remission. And so I would try things naturally, like I would take out like peanut butter, and then I would feel better. I'm like, oh, it was just peanut butter. And then all of a sudden I'd get worse again. And it was just a lot of trial and error, and nothing was working, actually.
So by the time you figured out what was going on, you find drugs that are working for you. What year is that?
2019.
Wow. Okay, so you kind of you figured this out, and then the pandemic happens, pretty much. It sounds like, right?
Yeah. I started on one of the biologics called Humira, and actually this was maybe 2018.
Okay.
Actually, 2018, and then that worked for about a year, and then it started wearing off, and every time it's an injection. And it would work for like 3 days, and then I would start feeling the effects again after 3 days. So I would try to take the injection close to race day so that I would feel good, and then it would wear off. And then I got on Enbrel, and that's been working. A year later, it's been working since. So I'm hoping that continues to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of start to get stuff dialed. So you have a program to manage your rheumatoid arthritis. Mm-hmm. You're able to probably to perform at a different level than you were previously. And then it sounds like then the pandemic happened. So at that point, as somebody who's a professional athlete whose livelihood would depend on being able to go out and compete against other people, how did you think about what was happening, and how did you come up with a plan for that period of time?
Gosh, a plan for that period of time didn't exist, I think, for anyone, because we were all just waiting for this to happen again, and we didn't know how long that was going to last. So I think I had to take it day by day, and I took it as an opportunity to just train really hard. And honestly, in the long run, maybe that helped me, because I think I was at that point in time with everything going on, forcing going. I wasn't necessarily enjoying it as much as I used to, and it definitely maybe played to my advantage, I want to say, but I say that hesitantly because there were definitely some breakdowns during that time of just uncertainty and like just keep training for the next race, and then it would get canceled, train for the next race, it would get canceled. So I think it was just a lot of ups and downs. And that's when I decided to do things like the white rim and try to find other ways to promote myself during that time.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit, and you have an awesome video about your FKT and then having to go back and do it again. And I'm just curious what that felt like. And again, we talked about it. I had Pete Stetton on. He kind of went through the thing where he missed it by a few seconds. He had to redo it. For you, you got the fastest known time. And for anyone who's listening, if you don't know what an FKT is, it's the fastest known time on a point-to-point route, either cycling or running. In this instance, we're talking about the White Rim Trail, which is in Moab, Utah. Very iconic route. And how were you feeling in that period in between getting it and then having to go back? Because, I mean, gosh, like it's like for you, it was about a 7-hour effort, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a massive effort.
Yeah. And at that time, I hadn't done anything like that. Now I've done Leadville and Unbound, and White Rim seems a little less daunting, but at the time that was a big effort for me. It was the longest thing I've ever done. And I kind of had a feeling that people would go for that time because I knew I hadn't done everything I could to get the fastest time that I could. And I didn't believe that was fastest time. I don't know. I just knew that people were going to go for that time, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I just didn't think that someone would go for it that quickly. I think it was like within a week. It's like, someone beat your FKT. And I was like, And at the time, I didn't think I was going to go do it again. But then, I know, I got to talking with Keegan and Tobin, and they were getting excited about going to do it. I'm like, yeah, let's go for it and try for it again. And so that's when we did it as a team. And
what did you change in your approach for the second time, other than you went a little bit faster? I mean, did you after you got it the first time, were you like, yeah, maybe I could have cut out some time here or there? Like, what did you think about?
Yeah, I think with my nutrition, I tried to do my nutrition a little better. That was the main thing I changed, I'd say, on the second time. We keep doing this, or I guess the first time we did it in October during Halloween, and the second time we did it in like March. And I think doing it then was a little hard for me because I was on the trainer all winter and I didn't have much saddle time on the mountain bike. I maybe was on my mountain bike once or twice before we went out and did this effort, but it was the best time to do it in the race season. I still haven't gone out and done my best effort, I guess. I have never done it with a power meter, and there's a lot of, and now knowing everything I know about doing these kind of long ultra distances, there's definitely a lot I would change if I went out and did it again. I think I could definitely take a lot of time off of it. So
probably don't want to give all of your secrets away, but what are some of those things that you would change if you went and did it again?
I would definitely use a power meter to help with figuring out effort, and then pacing would be a lot different. I keep going out too hard. My second half is a lot weaker than my first half. So that and the amount of calories I'm taking in per hour, I have a better idea of the grams I need. And so again, with nutrition, I would have a better handle on when I'm eating and what to eat. And I would probably try it on a hardtail instead of a full suspension. I think being a female, we weigh less, and I think that plays a bigger part in power to weight ratio. So it'd be interesting to try it on a hardtail. So yeah, I would like to go do it again. I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, you have all of these reps now with much longer events. I mean, particularly things like Leadville and everything that you're doing in the Lifetime Grand Prix. How have you found that style of racing and also being part of kind of this social media circus that now surrounds the Lifetime Grand Prix? What's that like for you as an athlete?
You know, it's interesting. I kind of like it because it gives like me something to do. I guess it gives me something I can do for my sponsors, and I'm just excited that something that's getting so much interest is something that I can be involved in. I do like longer distances. I think I can be good at them, but the whole 6 to 10 hour distance is definitely a new level of long distance for me. Yeah, it's been different just having all the attention on something like this. I'm not used to that kind of, I guess, attention and eyes on, on the events I'm doing. So I think it's a good thing, though. I'm glad it keeps me in the job.
Yeah. Did you watch the Lifetime Grand Prix YouTube series that they had for the series last year? Did you check that out?
I didn't watch all of it. I just watched a little bit of it. Just, I don't know. I just, I think they did a good job from what I did see. I think it's interesting. I think it brings people maybe outside the sport, brings new interest into it, creates drama.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my big takeaway. It did seem to create a lot of drama, and the portrayals of certain athletes, it certainly seemed like they were trying to create some villains and some heroes, which, I mean, it's a successful formula in sports entertainment. That's what pro wrestling is all about. You have heroes and you have heels, right? And you have to have high tension in any story to actually create drama. Do the athletes talk about those types of things, you know, when you're together in a town for a race or on the starting line or out there in a pack? Is there any actual beef?
I think with any competitive situation, there's always going to be some sort of beef. Yeah, just trying to think. I kind of like, my style is kind of having like that fun, like playful competitiveness
Right.
in racing. I enjoy like, you know, like throwing down, but at the same time, you know, we're all out there trying our best, and I do have respect for all of the women out there. It definitely makes it interesting, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the series depicts like there's some people out there having fun with playful attitude, and then there are people with sharper elbows. And I mean, that's true. And people have different approaches to competition and business and sport and life in every domain, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think particularly when you're creating a narrative around something, whether it's on social media or a series on a streaming service or whatever, like you got to have characters. Characters are what make things interesting to watch, and people sometimes talk some shit when they're out there racing as well. So
yeah,
anyway.
And I wasn't really a big part of the story last year, and this year I'm more involved, so it'll be interesting to see how I am portrayed. Okay.
So what, have they been doing a lot of interviews with you as you go through the series? Because you've had some pretty high placings.
Yeah, so I'll be, I think, a little more in the story this season.
Yeah. What does it feel like to you to be in that role and to be in that position?
It, I think, adds another variable to the race weekend, I think. I'm probably more of a quiet person, I think, so it's made me be a little more open and just more out there. And
right.
I don't know if it necessarily takes my focus off racing, but I definitely have to keep in mind to focus on racing when all of this other stuff is also part of the weekend, you know, and like keep things in balance. I guess it's hard to...
How do you do that? How do you achieve balance? Because something like that, like it brings more pressure with it. It takes some of your time, and particularly in a context where you have to stay focused. What's kind of your personal formula for having the appropriate level of tension or excitement by the time you get to the start line?
I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I think what I like to do is try to get all that stuff done and then have Friday, the day before the race, have nothing going on that day, so I can just focus on what I need to do to get ready for the race. And every weekend is different. Sometimes I go into a race weekend feeling prepared and ready, and sometimes I feel unorganized. I think it just kind of depends on where I'm at and what headspace I'm in at the time. But it's kind of funny, the whole pressure part of it, because I'll have these interviews before the race, and then the race will go a certain way, and I'll feel like, oh my gosh, like Unbound did not go well for me. And I had a bunch of interviews and pre-rides and stuff leading up to Unbound, and I was just like, kind of building this story around, I guess, I feel like the story I was trying to build was being tough and never quitting. And then I go into Unbound and had this horrible situation and made this decision to step out of the race. And I was like, wow, that didn't really play to my story at all. And so that, I think it just, it's just been interesting. I guess I've never I've gone through this sort of experience.
What happened during the race, and why did you decide to stop?
Yeah, I think a lot of things were happening during the race. I wasn't in a great headspace leading up to it. I think I just had a lot going on, a lot on my mind. I had my grandpa's funeral the next weekend and just some life stuff going on. And usually I'm really good at just focusing on the race, and none of that ever matters. But Unbound is a different style of race because it is very long and very taxing. And I think it can affect you months out if you it's just a race that affects you because it's so long. And I think it started out fine, and I was moving up, and I eventually got on Sophia's wheel, and I could tell that I was starting to fade. And I was like, okay, I just got to hang on for like 100 more miles. And my back was just killing me, and I just was not in a good place. And I was I rode for as long as I possibly could with Sophia, and it was just like one more mile. I was taking it 1 mile at a time, and eventually I just couldn't hang on any longer. And so I fell back, and it got hot, and I just kind of detonated a little bit. I was like walking my bike, and like then a group of women passed me, and I realized that this was going to be a drop race because a lot of people passed me. Mm-hmm. And once I realized I was going to drop the race, I could not find any motivation. It's like I felt like I was injuring myself, and so there was like a health concern for training, and it just finishing it. I finished it last year. That wasn't really a motivation for me. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of lost it.
How have you worked through that since making that decision? Did you do that on your own? Like, did other people help you think through that decision afterwards?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much of a negative impact it would have on me afterwards, just mm-hmm. dropping out of a race, because I've never really dropped out of a race before, and I think it hurt my confidence a little bit in my workouts for the next couple weeks when I was putting in efforts. It just reminded me of that feeling at Unbound when I was trying to push through my intervals, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is actually affecting me mentally. I didn't think that could ever happen, and I just felt so ashamed. But during the race, I didn't think of any of that stuff because I was just thinking about what was best, which was to not race anymore because I'm already dropping it, and to not injure myself more. And so, that was a new experience for me, and it took me, I'd say, like 3 weeks. Well, so I ended up doing another race, Bighorn Gravel, and that's in Colorado. And I think just everything was still affecting me at that point. I did not do as well as I'd hoped, and kind of had a little bit of a breakdown on that one too, because my back was still hurting, and mentally trying to get that confidence back. And then after Bighorn, it was Crusher, and just didn't have the legs that day. And so I went through like 3 races of just getting crushed, I think, mm-hmm. and not performing how I'd like to. And I felt like I was in a bit of a hole. I think I was in a mid-season rut just because it's a long season, and I just didn't have the legs. And Unbound, I think, even though I didn't finish, was still very taxing, and I was trying to recover from that. And mentally, just having known that I dropped out, it just kind of sits in your head in a bad place. And so I was going to some dark places. And I think after Crusher, I was finally able to kind of get my body back and regain some confidence. And it was a process.
Yeah. And then, we're not too far away. I mean, gosh, it was only a couple of weeks ago you won the Marathon Mountain Bike National Championship. So what was different, or what shifted leading into that race, and how did it feel when you were on the start line there?
Yeah, at that point, Unbound is not even in my head anymore. Like it's long enough ago that I felt like I was in a completely different phase. I've had some solid seconds, lots of seconds. So getting on the start line of Marathon Nationals was like, I need to break that whole, like, getting second place thing. I need to, this is my race. I need to go for it. And I just had the mentality of, I need to win this one. And that one was stressful because I don't know if you heard how Marathon Nationals played out at all.
I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was an interesting race for everyone because they sent us out on the start loop, but it wasn't marked off where it needed to be to cut back into the start line. And so all of the pros ended up doing the full loop, which was 19 miles, but we did part of the start loop, so it ended up being like, I don't know, 15 miles instead of 7 miles. And
whoa.
So we were in a group of 4 women at the time, and we were trying to figure out what was going on, like where our feed zones are going to be now, and if they're going to have us make us do an extra lap. So the race was either going to be like 35 miles because they'll cut it short, or it was going to be around 60 miles because they'll add on another lap. And so we're trying to figure out like what was happening and how to play out this race. And we came in through the feed zone. Someone told us 2 more laps to go. So we're like, okay, so it's going to be a really long day. And we're trying to plan out that and figure out, when you plan out your race, you know where the feed zones are going to be, where you're going to get your gels, where you're going to get your water bottles. That all completely changed. We thought we were going to I was planning on grabbing a gel at 7 miles when we were going into the start finish area. We didn't hit our first feed zone until like mile 15. And, I was planning on dropping a pack at some point. And so just trying to figure out mentally where all this was going to happen. And while all this was happening, going into our second lap, all the amateurs had gone off right in front of us. And so this was on a course that was really windy, single track, and you couldn't pass very easily. And so as I was making a gap, we were trying to get around all these people. And so every time I felt like I was maybe getting a little bit of a distance, people would catch back on my wheel and then let us through. And then, we'd have to get around groups of like 12, and it would take several minutes to get around people. And, it was stressful for them and for us. And it was just kind of chaotic and dangerous. And we at this point, we still didn't know how long we were racing. And we finally got to this point about 10 miles back to the finish start area. Someone was like, this is your last lap. And so with 10 miles to go, I could finally make some race decisions on dropping the pack and what to eat and where to try to make a move. And so it was like, I need to win this race, but this is really stressful and I got to figure this out. But everyone was in the same boat, but it just was very unpredictable, and it's definitely interesting.
That's intense. How did you manage to stay composed and flexible in that scenario?
I did pretty good with trying to stay flexible. I was just like, okay, we've got enough nutrition to last. If I have to do another lap, just make sure I'm eating and drinking, and I'll be okay, and managing my pace as well. But I got to this. I definitely lost it at one point trying to pass. Like I finally I felt like I was making a gap, and then most people were just really nice and letting us by, but there was a couple people who just wouldn't let us by. It was like, we're racing too. I couldn't get around, and I finally got around. One person couldn't get around the other person, ended up having to put a foot down. Then the other person passed me again, and I just broke down. I was like, I kind of screamed. I was like, this is ridiculous. And so I definitely, at one point of the race, went through a bit of like losing it, and then kind of regained composure, and that changed my mindset. I was like, okay, I'm not getting away. I'm going to have to play this, and this is just going to come down to a sprint. And so Deanna and I were together at the time, and I just slowed down and just chilled, and I was like, okay, this is just how it's going to play out. We're going to have to wait to pass people, and then get around, and then get to the next group, and that's just how the day is going to be. And I'm just going to have to conserve until the last straightaway sprint to the finish. And so that's kind of how the race ended up playing out, and I tried to save energy and then rode around and sprinted into the finish for the win.
That's intense, but you executed.
I did. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it's like, this is just how the day's going.
That's pretty amazing. Good job.
Thank you.
It's a very difficult thing to do, to stay mentally composed in a scenario like that. And again, for anybody who's listening who hasn't raced mountain bikes in a large group, the last time I really had that kind of situation was at the Pisgah stage race in North Carolina. And even among the amateurs, it gets intense, and people need to move off the trail so you can get by, or vice versa. And it can create some really gnarly, not fun scenarios. And when it's your actual job and you have people blocking you, that's got to just be really hard to manage. But to be able to persevere through that and execute and stay focused is pretty amazing.
Yeah, thanks. I think in those situations, you just gotta, at some point, let it happen and go with it.
Yeah. So, to go in an entirely different direction, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on here is because you've started to post some clips of yourself. I didn't know if you were just DJing or if you were actually producing and mixing stuff live and playing with loops. But it turns out you're an electronic music producer, and your music's pretty amazing. I don't know if what you're posting on Instagram or your own compositions, are they?
They are, yeah. I know it's kind of confusing what I'm doing. I'd like to start posting some clips of what's happening on screen.
Right.
But yeah, all the songs are originally produced. It's kind of a funny thing. I've kind of been like a closet producer for a while because I always felt pretty dorky doing it. It's like, this is just my thing that I like to do. And I don't know, I guess I've started getting some interesting feedback from it, and it's made me more open in sharing it. So. Yeah,
and so with the style of production you're doing and the way you're actually performing, I know you use Ableton Live, and for anybody listening, that's a digital audio workstation, and you can both use virtual synthesizers, drum machines, instruments to create tracks and loops, or you could be working with samples. So are you working with samples, or are you actually composing the loops yourself? And then I'm guessing that you're triggering loops when you're actually playing with the push controller. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so I'm doing a little bit of everything. I'd like to start creating with a keyboard. I have like a full-size keyboard at home, and I start making melodies and things like that. And then I make all the drums and stuff like that myself, but I'll find the drum samples online. So like I'll find a kick and a snare and things like that.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll use loops for inspiration, like drum loops, and start with like a loop, but then create something of my own. But a lot of times I'll just like throw in kicks and snares. And then like all the piano stuff, all of the melodies I write, any type of strings or pads, things like that. And then I'll find like samples online, like vocal samples or things that I'll find interesting, and chop them up and do things with them. And once in a while I will find a loop online. Like I've done this song recently with a saxophone loop, and I just created like a whole song around that loop. And I did some actual audio stuff with it. I had a friend play some guitar stuff, and then I threw in some like violin stuff. And so it kind of just depends. A lot of the times I'll start a song and have no idea where I'm going with it. I'll just find inspiration and it'll just start building off of itself. I won't have like a plan going into it. Like I'm going to create this style of song at this tempo with this kick. It just kind of, I find it's kind of funny. I'll start with a melody on my keyboard, and by the end, it'll be a completely different thing. Like I kind of just change it until it's something worth listening to, I guess. Sometimes it just sucks and I have to throw it away, and sometimes I'm like, okay, that's starting to sound like a song.
Yeah, and for people who haven't heard your music, and again, you've posted some live performance stuff on Instagram, people should definitely check that out, and we'll have a link in the show notes to your Instagram. And I find it to be kind of interesting that you ride for the Santa Cruz HtSqd. I know you don't live in Santa Cruz, but your style reminds me of Tipper, kind of like psychedelic down-tempo stuff. That might not be everything that you produce, but it reminds me a lot of stuff that I've heard at parties in the Santa Cruz Mountains out in the forest.
That's awesome.
So I think that's kind of interesting. And I really dig what you're producing. I think it's awesome, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of it.
Thanks.
For you, with that creative process, which you just described a little bit, does it it start with an idea? Do you ever like have a melody or drum idea in your head when you're out writing and then you sit down and start composing? Or do you kind of sit down with a blank canvas and just start tooling around?
I usually just sit down with a blank canvas and start tooling around. Yeah, it's probably, I think the better or the more experience I'm getting with it, I'm starting to be able to throw in some like technique and start seeing what I'm doing and knowing what I'm doing instead of just like randomly throwing things together until I feel like something sounds good or works, like playing by ear. So now I can kind of see actually what's happening instead of just listening and creating, which is helpful because my usual process is, it takes a long time and I go through a lot of phases. Like sometimes I'll work on something until like 5 a.m. and you listen to something long enough, it sounds good when it doesn't. And I'll be like, I just created the most amazing thing. And then I'll go to bed and wake up and listen to it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's so horrible. But then I'll come back to it the next day and be like, okay, I kind of see where I was trying to go with this and like get rid of this thing that sounded horrible, add this, take away that. And then all of a sudden it like becomes what I wanted it to be. So I go through a lot of phases when I create music. But I think the more I'm learning about it, it's becoming easier.
Yeah. I could imagine it might become easier. And then you also, as you're learning more about production and just from a craft point of view, what you like doing, it also probably just opens the door to more complexity and more things to potentially master. And I heard you mention in another interview that you did that you started playing around with the digital audio workstation because your dad produces and records music. I think he does rock music. Is that, from what you shared, it sounded like he's using like traditional instruments probably?
Yeah, he likes to play like classic rock kind of stuff. Do you know Richie Furay?
I don't.
He's part of Buffalo Springfield.
Okay.
Anyway, my dad and him have been doing a lot of music gigs together, and like,
so
that's
cool.
kind of his style is playing acoustic guitar and singing. And when I was younger, he kind of forced me to sing with him and play with him, and I actually ended up enjoying it as I got older. I still hate the sound of my voice, but that's something we did together, and that was pretty fun. I like to do harmonies while he sang and played some backup guitar and stuff like that. So I grew up doing that. I was in orchestra, so I have a little bit of violin experience, tooled around with piano. But yeah, I guess just going really far back in time, my earliest memories are like me sitting on my dad's guitar while he walked around playing the acoustic guitar around the house. So it's always been kind of a big part of my life, along with sports. But anyway, so I don't even remember why I decided to start recording some keyboard stuff, but at some point I must have made a melody and was like, and my dad said, here, try using this digital audio workstation, which wasn't Ableton, it was something else. And I didn't know how to lock in loops and stuff like that. So it's really hard to get everything to be in tempo and in sync. And, but I just started playing around with that and I learned what MIDI was. And from there, it just kind of snowballed into more interest into what this whole electronic scene was. And I think this was in high school. Yeah.
So you probably were like playing with GarageBand or Logic or Fruity Loops, or do you even remember?
None of the big name stuff. It was, what was it? Sonar.
Yeah, there were so many, right?
It was it was like one of the less known ones. Cakewalk. That's what it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember Cakewalk. Cakewalk was a very Cakewalk and Cubase were really popular in the early days.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as popular now. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it and I just became obsessed. And I don't want to say it's something I've just done since, because I've gone through phases of like being obsessed with it. And then I would put it down for years and not think about it and then pick it back up for a couple of years. So it was kind of an in and out thing. And that's why it hasn't like been a big progression. It's been slow, you know, just with biking and stuff being in the forefront and the focus.
Totally. What does it do for you as a person? How does it make you feel when you're creating and when you listen to music that you make?
It's rewarding, I think. I think I've learned a lot from the whole process of creating music. It's like I said, there are times where I'll create something, think it's amazing, and then go back, listen to it. It sounds like it's something completely different. It's taught me the determination to keep working on it, even when you feel like you failed. And then just when I'm happy with something, it's just a successful feeling of like, that's what I was looking for. Just like you're in search of something and finding it and not giving up on it, I guess. But I think it does take a lot, almost like emotional energy and focus. And sometimes I think I get a little bit too drawn into it, and it takes me out of my job as a professional athlete. So it's a balancing act with it too, because sometimes it's helpful to have like something to take me out of that whole stress of racing and do something else. But at the same time, sometimes it takes too much of my attention.
Yeah. And
which is funny. I'm sorry. It's funny that I've allowed it to take my attention because, you know, I haven't really done anything with it. So it didn't really have a purpose. It's just something I obsessed over for no reason.
I mean, it sounds like the purpose is it brings you a lot of joy as a human being, which is a pretty, you know,
I guess
a lot of
a good
people.
Purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty incredible reason to do something. Yeah. And it's a lot of people don't have something like that in their life, sadly. So I think it's remarkable and amazing that you found something that you love that brings you joy. And when I've heard you talk about it in other interviews, it sounds like this is something that you haven't really shared publicly very much until pretty recently, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know. I think a lot of it too is just finding like a path with it, because as I've been creating, I didn't know what sound I was looking for. I got into cinematic sounds for a while. I actually, for a while, started putting background music onto my videos. I would wear a camera at short tracks races, and I would put music on the background for those. And, you know, people just wouldn't notice that sort of thing. So it's like, all right, well, this is still fun. I'm enjoying doing it. And once I got into using the push, it's like, well, this is something maybe I could do and share and use this as a tool to perform. Right. And I think that's really what opened the door to sharing music.
I was just looking something up on Spotify. Are you familiar with the artist Kindred by chance?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he signed to Dead Mouse's label. Dead Mouse found him on SoundCloud, but just he has a really cinematic sweep to some of his tracks, and it's also kind of that down-tempo, brooding, moderately psychedelic kind of vibe. I don't know. Just think it's an artist
I have to look that up.
that you might dig.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I've also heard you say that, you know, you didn't like grow up raving or going out and hearing electronic music, right? Like you're just somebody who's been producing. You haven't really been out and experienced a lot of this.
Yeah, it's I never really knew the scene at all. I went to my first electronic thing last winter in Denver, and that was really interesting. It's kind of an eye-opener to what it's really all about, what the electronic music scene really actually looks like. It's a whole like new world of music, and just, I don't know, it's exciting because I'm learning a lot about it.
Yeah. And when you think about, I mean, do you have, now that you're kind of sharing what you're doing with music a bit more, and I guess with cycling as well, like what are your aspirations? Where do you want to take these things over time, and what kind of human being do you want to be in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to look that far ahead. This whole thing is all so new, and I have no idea what the potential is and how good I am, or like what the deal is with it. So I'm kind of just treating it as a hobby for now. It's fun having this unique opportunity. I'm going to DJ a set for the gravel rave at Big Sugar.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah, and so I'm going to put together some stuff for that. But I'm trying to like just keep it fun. I don't want to have expectations on it, and I don't know if it's going to take me anywhere or if it's just going to be a fun hobby. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not planning on doing it in the future as like a DJ or anything like that, just because I just don't know enough yet if that's a thing.
Yeah, totally.
And for biking, you know, obviously with athletics, there's always an age limit with that. I know I want to race for at least the next couple of years. And I'm not really sure how long I'm going to continue with that as well. So I'm just taking it year by year at this point and enjoying it.
What do you hope to achieve before your cycling career ends? Are there any boxes you really want to tick? Do you have aspirations of, I don't know, I mean, you're marathon national champion. Do you want to be doing that at the UCI level? Do you have any interest in that?
Yeah, I would definitely like to take that to the next level and do some races on the world level. I'm hoping to get some opportunities to do that maybe next year, in the next couple of years. And that would be my goal, I think, is doing some more mountain bike marathon events on the world level and doing some cool iconic events, maybe Cape Epic or, you know, some stage racing, things like that. Those are on my list.
Do you have plans to hit any of those events in 2024? Like, is that definitely on the calendar?
Nothing is definitely on the calendar as of yet. Still trying to sort through what the team's doing and what kind of our goals are. So still figuring that out. Very cool. So you mentioned that in 4th grade, you knew you wanted to be a professional athlete. Why'd you want to be a professional athlete? Yeah, that's a great question too. Well, we had this fun run in elementary school, and it was a mile run, and we did that every spring. And I had absolutely no interest in it. 3rd grade and down, I walked it and I didn't like it. But for some reason in 4th grade, I think something changed. Maybe I just got a little more matured. And I ended up winning the mile. And people thought that I had gone off course or cheated or something. It was kind of funny, but really I had just gotten really into it. And I think after winning this fun run in my elementary school, I just became obsessed with it. And I realized it was kind of a thing. School wasn't really a thing of mine. I always struggled a little bit because it was hard for me to focus and pay attention. And I was always like, just off in my own little world. So I just didn't really have a thing. And so when I found running, it's almost like I found my thing. And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do. And yeah, just gave me confidence in life. I've also heard you talk about how your dad was a runner and that he would like run on a treadmill. And I'm just thinking about, like, it sounds like your family has had a huge influence on what you've ended up doing, specifically your dad. Yeah. And was that kind of the same thing with running? Like, did you, when you were young, did he try to get you to run, or is that just... Yeah. What's interesting with my dad, he never really like pressured. I have an older brother. He never pressured my brother and I to do things, but I just remember looking up to him and thinking he was, you know, when you're a kid, your dad is your hero, and seeing him run on the treadmill, he would run so hard and just like basically to his breaking point. And I just remember thinking he was so tough, and and this was when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I think that just was in my head. And as I got older, I think just seeing that as a young kid, it pushed me to do things like that as well. Yeah, my dad's definitely a huge influence or was a huge influence on my life, still is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm wondering, because you mentioned kind of this point of origin is that you won the mile race in 4th grade, and that's got to feel great when you're a young person and suddenly you can smoke everybody. Over time, and like now as a professional athlete,
do you enjoy the process, and like, do you enjoy being out there training? Like when you have to go out and do, I don't know, a 6-hour training ride, is that something that's fun for you, or are you grinding?
I like intervals, I would say. I'm not a huge fan yet on the long rides, but I love going out and doing like VO2 or threshold, any type of intervals. I really enjoy. That's just what I've known since I was young. I've done intervals my whole life, and it's kind of my happy, painful, dark place, if that makes any sense. So I do enjoy the whole process of training. I'd say long rides are a little harder for me just because I like the intensity of racing and riding and just athletics. And that's more of a long, like learning how to focus sort of training. And so still getting the hang of putting in the volume, I guess, for these big events.
Yeah. And when you are putting in the volume, do you shut your brain off, or do you have kind of like a running track? Are you thinking a lot and talking to yourself a lot when you're out there doing those rides?
I definitely have to have music playing. I'll listen to music. Sometimes I'll, in a way, study it and just try to like listen to the beats and figure out what's going on and kind of learn as I'm riding. Or sometimes I'll just like jam out. So music is huge for me in those long rides. Yeah, it's what gives me, I don't know if I'd be able to, no, I shouldn't say that. It definitely helps me get through a lot of training rides.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Alexis, thanks so much for being here today and sharing about you as a person, a musician, and athlete. I'm really excited to see what the rest of your career is going to bring and to hear what kind of music you're going to produce. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being on the podcast. Thanks for having me.